Hi guys, we are entering part 2 of chapter 4, the dangers of anger. And in this, we are starting off with anger fuels violence. There are two things which lead to or fuel violence, anger and fear. If one lashes out in anger, one is often out of control. A synonym for anger is mad. I was mad at my wife for wrecking the car. Another synonym for mad is insane. When we are mad, we often feel insane or out of control. That is why a lot of men want to cool off before talking about whatever made the couple mad. So, like, if a man goes for a walk, right? I know, okay, we're starting this off. All right, my ex and I, if we argued, and this would piss me off, I'm not gonna lie, he would want to cool off. He would want to go for a walk or go get away from me to breathe, right? And I'm just like, no, like, we got to talk it out. This was my mistake. Now, granted, I was 18, 19, 20, right? I was very young. I didn't understand these things. And now I'm like, no, this makes sense. Let me cool off too so that I can come in with a clear mind, right? This is important because if we just jump in, we're not clear. We're still just in the throes of that emotion when we talked about it in the last clip, when we talk about like seeing red or not seeing clearly. What did they say? I couldn't see straight, right? That's kind of what it is. So just keep that in mind. If a wife insists on talking things out in that moment, when both are still angry, not very much is going to be accomplished except an escalation of anger. And that's very true. In studies of both men's and women's reactions to angers, it was observed that men tend toward retaliation and women tend towards reparation, which is probably a hormonal response. Because of this difference in attitude, it is important for women to understand that men may not be reacting the same way they are. Therefore, they need to allow men time to gain some perspective on the situation. Now, before I get a basket of mail from gentlemen, I want to say that not all people react according to gender-specific paradigms, but hormones do play a part in our emotional reactions to events. So we can't just ignore the aspect of a situation. Okay, I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to get into that hormonal part. And I'm going to go with the animalistic point of view in terms of hormones, right? We have 3 hormones that we tend to have: progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. And it's usually the testosterone. The higher testosterone you have, the more that you're likely to be angry and active and lash out and all of those things. Now, I say this not because testosterone in itself is bad. I say this because when you look at animals, sorry, this is coming from my brain where I've been around animals my entire life. When you say castrate a bull, okay? And no, I'm not saying to castrate men. Please don't think I'm going that way. When we say to castrate a bull, right, there is a reason that we're doing it, right? We're taking the majority of the testosterone out so that they are not going to harm us. And there's other reasons, right? But you see the drop in the anger from the bull, right? They're not going to have those initial reactions towards people. Now, you also see this in other animals like dogs and cats when you neuter and spade. It doesn't necessarily mean that all of, like I said, not all of those hormones are gone, but those animals will calm down, right? It doesn't just go for the schmexualization, right, towards the other gender, but the outburst, the anger, the overstimulation. There's a lot of things that testosterone specifically does to the body, right? And so I want you guys to remember that men tend to have, and I say tend, to have a higher amount of testosterone than women, right? Women, and again, it depends on your age, but also the time of the month for the woman. If they're menstruating, your progesterone and your estrogen levels will change and all of that, right? So just remember that, right? When you're dealing with all those things, our hormones really do tend to take over. So that's not trying to be gender specific. That's just trying to explain, like, look, these hormones are in all of our bodies and they're just at different levels. Okay? All right. That being clear. Continuing on. Our culture, which sanctions anger, is a violent society. We see it everywhere. Children grow up watching violent cartoons. They graduate to violent movies and video games. If the violence is performed by the quote-unquote good guys, it is condoned. Societies in which the venting of anger is encouraged have 5 times the crime rate of those where it is not. Oh, that's interesting. In the U.S. today, murder, assault, rape, spousal, and child abuse are rampant, yet we continue to quote-unquote let it all hang out. According to Martin Seligman, out of control anger ruins more lives than most other things, including AIDS and alcohol. Manners and courtesy have become as rare as hen's teeth. Given what is going on in our schools, as well as in the workplace and sporting events, it might be time for manners to make a comeback. As silly as some rules of the etiquette may seem, they are there to slow us down, to show respect, to make others feel comfortable. Please note that these rules take someone other than the individual into account. We are, after all, social beings meant to interact with one another, not simply look out for ourselves. Okay, so kind of talked about it. I believe it was the last clip, right? When I said take a break and look at it from a different point of view. So sorry about that. Like walking a mile in someone else's shoes. You can't literally do that unless that person has the same size feet, right? Just thinking literally there. But the point is not to be so literal about it, but to stop and think about other people's experiences, right? Whether they come from a different race, a different culture, a different religion, a different community, right? It's to think and be like, oh, let's talk about that. Let's sit back and listen to lived experiences. So anyway, continuing on. And I want to make note, I have a story time right after I read this paragraph because it's important to go back to that note. It was noted that after the terrorist act of September 11th, 2001, people began to appreciate one another and to cooperate with one another. Yes, there were some who wanted to retaliate against anyone who remotely resembled the terrorists, but most people were feeling truly connected, empathetic, and loving toward their families and their fellow human beings. Although I am skeptical that this attitude will have any staying power. Wouldn't it be wonderful if it did? Then perhaps when one got cut off on the freeway, instead of having thoughts of outrage and revenge, one could reflect and wonder, does he have an exit right away and that he was unaware of? Is he on the way to the hospital? Perhaps he didn't see me. Have I ever done that to anyone? These kinds of reflections are much more gentle to our bodies and psyches than the rage that some people allow themselves to feel. Okay, so going back to that September 11th, 2001, I was in 5th grade. Okay, so keep that in mind. I lived in New York City at the time. My parents both watched the towers fly in, go down, and I remember that day like it was yesterday. And I still have extreme panic and anxiety, especially being down by ground zero. Okay, I want to make that clear. I know it's been 20 plus years, but I still feel that deep down. And that alone is a trauma response. Okay, I want to make that clear that a lot of people that experience and live through this have similar trauma responses that I do, right? I lived in the city. I had to walk down into the smoke. But I remember back in high school, so this was 2005, 2006, somewhere in there, maybe 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. I joined what we call Model UN, okay? And this is a time where schools are, it's an extracurricular, and you get assigned a country. Your school represents that country, and then eventually you get to go to the United Nations, and you represent that country, and you come up with solutions based off how that country would react. And our first year doing it, now again, this is only a couple years, after 2001, right, 9/11, my school was assigned Afghanistan. And my initial reaction was, what the hell? How can we represent a country that did harm to us? Right? But I want to tell you how grateful I am for that experience, because it forced me to not think like an American, but to think like an Afghani. It made me look at their country from their perspective. What would they want? What do they feel? What is their culture? What are their hopes and dreams, right? And when Nancy was just saying, yes, there were a few people that wanted to retaliate against people that looked like the terrorists, it wasn't just a few. A lot of people targeted Muslims. They targeted people that were Afghani, that were from Iraq, that were from, Pakistan, India, anyone that was Muslim, right? They didn't care. The same thing happened during the pandemic when, Trump called it the China virus. People were attacking those of Asian descent, right? Not caring if they were Chinese or not, but not that they would ever deserve that, right? Like, I want to make that clear. Islamophobia became a huge thing. Xenophobia was rampant, right? And instead of fueling, it was a lot of anger, right? It was a lot of anger. And we went to war for what? Like, we're talking, I'm sorry, I'm getting political here. We went to war for basically nothing, right? And that was out of anger. And there were other things, gas and the terrorists retaliated against the Bushes and all that stuff. Like, I'm not saying it's okay. None of that was okay. I want to make that clear. But my point is that I had the experience at a young age, right, to quote unquote walk a mile in someone else's shoes, walk a mile in someone that we as a country were claiming were terrorists, right? Obviously not the whole country was terrorists, right? The extremists, but it really gave me quite the perspective and empathy and understanding. And I'm not going to lie, it was extremely hard, to critically think like that when we have all this propaganda against it. And I'm going to say this about adoption, right? The same thing is happening. We have the rainbows and butterflies. Oh, adoption is life-saving. Oh, adoption can do this, that, and the other thing. Meanwhile, right, The truth is that's not the case. The truth is that a lot of adoptees are angry about the relinquishment, are angry at the what we feel like abandoned, right? Or the actual adoption. And that's okay. It's a completely valid emotion to feel and talk about, and it should be talked about. It shouldn't be looked at as a bad thing. Like I was saying in my first, in the video before this, healthy coping mechanisms are going to be important. Anyway, have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys tomorrow.